In the autumn of 1944, the Pacific Ocean became the stage for the greatest naval clash humanity had ever witnessed. 4 days of chaos, fire, and thunder shook the waters around the Philippine archipelago. It was here, at Leyte Gulf, that two empires, one rising, one desperate, collided in a battle that would decide the fate of the Pacific War. It was the largest naval battle in history, involving more ships, aircraft, and men than any other sea conflict before or since. At stake was not just control of a bay or an island, but the very survival of Japan as a maritime power. To understand why Leyte Gulf became inevitable, we must step back. By 1944, the tide of World War II had turned. The Japanese Empire, which had swept across Asia and the Pacific in 1941 and 1942, was now being rolled back. The once mighty Imperial Japanese Navy, which had stunned the world at Pearl Harbor and claimed triumph at the fall of Singapore, now faced a relentless foe. American industrial power churned out ships and planes at a pace the Japanese could never match. The great carrier battles of Coral Sea and Midway had cost Japan her most seasoned aviators. The bloody struggle in the Solomon Islands drained her strength further. And by mid-1944, the United States was advancing across the Central Pacific, island by island, base by base, closing in on Japan itself. General Douglas MacArthur, Supreme Commander of Allied forces in the Southwest Pacific, had long promised, "I shall return." It was more than a vow, it was a campaign objective. The liberation of the Philippines would sever Japan's southern resource lifeline from the oil fields of Borneo and Sumatra. Without oil, the engines of Japan's war machine would seize. The Philippines became the decisive crossroads. And so, in October 1944, American forces prepared to land at Leyte, in the central islands of the archipelago. The Japanese High Command understood the gravity. Operation Shogo, or Operation Victory, was conceived, a desperate gamble to destroy the American fleet and halt the invasion. It was bold, reckless, and born of desperation. Japan's last major battleships, including the colossal Yamato and Musashi, would sail forth. Carriers, stripped of most of their veteran pilots, would act as bait. The plan called for 3 separate naval forces to converge on Leyte Gulf, to crush the vulnerable American landing fleet and slaughter the invasion forces on the beaches. On October 20, 1944, American troops under MacArthur waded ashore at Leyte. MacArthur himself arrived dramatically, stepping onto the beach before cameras and declaring, "People of the Philippines, I have returned." Behind him loomed a vast armada of over 700 American ships. Japan's moment had come. The battle began on October 23 in the waters of the Sibuyan Sea. There, American carrier aircraft struck the Japanese center force under Admiral Takeo Kurita. Wave after wave of bombers and torpedo planes rained destruction upon the enemy. The pride of the Japanese Navy, the super battleship Musashi, was singled out. With her immense size, nearly 70,000 tons and armed with 9 18-inch guns, she was thought invincible. But over the course of the day, she was hit by no fewer than 19 torpedoes and 17 bombs. By sunset, Musashi rolled and sank beneath the waves, taking over 1,000 men with her. It was a harbinger of what was to come. Even as Kurita reeled, another part of the Japanese plan unfolded. The northern force, under Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, moved south with what appeared to be a formidable carrier fleet. But appearances deceived. These carriers were largely empty, their air wings depleted. They were a decoy, designed to lure Admiral William "Bull" Halsey's powerful Third Fleet away from Leyte. Halsey took the bait. Believing he was striking the enemy's main carrier force, he surged north with his battleships and fast carriers, leaving the San Bernardino Strait unguarded. The stage was set for the most dramatic clash of the battle, the action off Samar. On the morning of October 25, Kurita's center force, thought beaten, emerged unexpectedly from the San Bernardino Strait. Ahead of them lay only Task Unit 7743, known as Taffy 3, a handful of escort carriers, destroyers, and destroyer escorts. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and seemingly doomed. Kurita's fleet boasted battleships and heavy cruisers, bristling with guns that dwarfed the American escorts. Yet what followed became one of the most heroic actions in naval history. As Kurita's heavy guns opened fire, the thin American line charged. Destroyers like USS Johnston, under Commander Ernest Evans, launched desperate torpedo attacks against overwhelming odds. Evans, of Cherokee descent, declared to his crew, "A fighting ship cannot afford to withdraw." The Johnston and others pressed so close to the Japanese giants that their big guns could not depress low enough to hit them. Smoke screens cloaked the carriers, while their small aircraft, armed with nothing more than depth charges and machine guns, dove again and again at battleships. In the confusion, Kurita, convinced he was facing Halsey's main fleet, lost his nerve. Despite his power, he turned away, sparing the invasion fleet. Meanwhile, to the south in Surigao Strait, another Japanese force attempted to break through. There, Admiral Jesse Oldendorf executed what would be the last battleship versus battleship action in history. Lining his ships across the mouth of the strait, he crossed the T of the advancing Japanese column. In a thunderous barrage, American battleships, some survivors of Pearl Harbor like the West Virginia, took their revenge. Shell after shell slammed into the Japanese line. By dawn, the Southern force was annihilated. In the north, Admiral Ozawa's decoy carriers finally met their end. Halsey's Third Fleet descended upon them with fury. Japanese carriers Zuikaku, Zuiho, Chitos, and Chiyoda were sent to the bottom. The rising sun, which had once ruled the seas, was now setting in fire and wreckage. By October 26, the Battle of Leyte Gulf was over. Japan had lost 4 carriers, 3 battleships, 10 cruisers, and 11 destroyers, nearly half its remaining naval strength. More devastating still, it had squandered its last reserves of trained sailors and airmen. The Imperial Navy was broken, no longer able to conduct major operations. From that moment on, Japan's war at sea became a fight of desperation, marked by the rise of the kamikaze, suicide pilots hurling themselves at American ships in a final act of defiance. The aftermath was decisive. The American beachhead on Leyte was secure. The liberation of the Philippines had begun. Japan's southern resource lifeline was cut. The path to Okinawa and, ultimately, to Japan itself lay open. The largest naval battle in history had secured Allied dominance of the Pacific. The legacy of Leyte Gulf endures. It was a battle of epic scale, yet also of human courage and sacrifice. The doomed charge of Taffy 3 stands as a testament to valor in the face of overwhelming odds. The battle marked the twilight of the battleship era and the final rise of the aircraft carrier as the arbiter of naval power. And for Japan, it was the beginning of the end. Historian Samuel Eliot Morison would later write, "The Japanese Navy had been destroyed as an effective fighting force." Today, the waters of Leyte remain quiet, concealing beneath them the hulks of giants like Musashi and Zuikaku. They are silent graves, reminders of a time when the fate of nations was decided by steel and fire upon the sea. The Battle of Leyte Gulf was more than a clash of ships. It was the death knell of an empire and the herald of a new age of warfare. Bringing stories like this to life requires time, research, and care. If you value detailed and high-quality historical storytelling, consider supporting efforts that keep history alive. so that the sacrifices and lessons of the past are never forgotten.